How much can the human body actually take? Have you ever tried to hold your breath as long as possible? Or push through heat well above 40 degrees Celsius? Or gone to bed without dinner? Even if you think you already know your limit, the human body is capable of far more than most of us realize. Just please don't try any of this at home. Let's start with cold. What's the lowest body temperature a person can actually survive? The human body was never built for cold in the first place. We evolved on the hot African savanna, where shedding heat mattered far more than holding on to it. That's why, without clothing, keeping your normal internal temperature of 37 degrees is nearly impossible. Once the body loses heat faster than it can produce it, that temperature starts to drop. Below 35 degrees, hypothermia sets in, violent shivering, skin turning pale as blood retreats from the limbs toward vital organs. At 30 degrees, you lose consciousness. At 25, the heart stops. 1 degree lower than that, and death is nearly unavoidable. But one woman blew past that limit so dramatically that she changed medicine itself. Anna Bogenholm was skiing when she fell headfirst into a gap in the ice on a frozen river. She spent 80 minutes trapped under 20 centimeters of ice, and her core temperature collapsed to 13.7 degrees. Her heart stopped, but she didn't die. The icy water had already been cooling her organs, especially her brain, before her heart gave out, which meant her brain needed dramatically less oxygen to survive. Technically, Anna was clinically dead for more than 2 hours, but it was the cold itself that slowed the death of her neurons and bought doctors the time they needed to bring her back. Her case didn't just end in recovery. It launched the entire field of therapeutic hypothermia, where doctors now deliberately cool a patient's body to 32 to 34 degrees during heart surgery, strokes, liver failure, and severe seizures. Anna herself was saved by a medical team who hooked her up to a heart-lung bypass machine, running her blood through it and returning it to her body warm, degree by careful degree, to avoid triggering a second cardiac arrest. 13.7 degrees remains the lowest confirmed body temperature anyone has ever survived. So how much heat can we take? One of the most brutal ultramarathons on the planet, Badwater, takes place every July in Death Valley, the hottest place on Earth, where a temperature of 56.7 degrees was recorded back in 1913, still the highest ever measured anywhere. Runners have to cover 217 kilometers in that furnace. Roughly 30% never finish, and the course record stands at 21 hours and 30 minutes. How much external heat your body can handle depends heavily on your fitness, your exertion level, and how hydrated you are. But the general rule is this. At extremely high humidity, the ceiling sits around 60 degrees because humidity stops sweat from evaporating, and evaporation is what actually cools you down. Scientists call this critical threshold the wet bulb temperature. At a certain combination of heat and 100% humidity, the body physically cannot cool itself through sweat at all, even in a perfectly healthy person at complete rest. After just 10 minutes in those conditions, core temperature can spike to 40 degrees, severe hyperthermia, where organs start failing and death follows without intervention. The record holder here is an American named Willie Jones, hospitalized during an Atlanta heat wave with an internal body temperature of 46.5 degrees. He spent 24 days in the hospital and somehow survived. How long can we go without breathing? Most people struggle to last past a minute, though on average we can manage about 3. But there's a specific technique called static apnea, holding your breath motionless, face down in cold water. It works thanks to the mammalian dive reflex. Cold water against the face constricts blood vessels, pulling blood away from the limbs toward the heart and brain and slowing its circulation through the rest of the body. Before attempting a hold, divers deliberately hyperventilate because the brain's urge to breathe is triggered by carbon dioxide levels in the blood, not oxygen levels. Flushing out that carbon dioxide delays the breathe now signal considerably. Using this technique, Frenchman Stéphane Mifsud set the record in 2009 at 11 minutes and 35 seconds. And if you pre-breathe pure oxygen before going under, you can nearly double that time. Spaniard Aleix Segura Vendrell stayed underwater for 24 minutes and 3 seconds in 2016. The danger is that the brain can run low on oxygen without any warning to the person experiencing it. Underwater blackouts can happen with zero warning symptoms, which is exactly why records like these are only attempted under close supervision from a safety team. How long can a person survive without water? It entirely depends on the conditions. Intense exercise on a hot, sunny day can burn through 1.5 liters of water an hour. Blood volume drops, blood pressure falls, the blood itself thickens, and the heart has to work harder just to pump it. At some point, sweating stops altogether, the body overheats even faster, and death follows within hours. At the opposite extreme, cold conditions with minimal exertion, a person can last roughly a week. But those are the two extremes. Under normal conditions, the limit is 3 to 4 days without water. Austrian Andreas Mihawik blew that record out of the water. He was mistakenly locked in a holding cell and forgotten about for 18 days. There's still some debate around the case. By some accounts, he survived by licking condensation off the walls. And how many times can you eat molten lava? Once. No matter how badly you want to, there won't be a second time. Back to a more serious question. How long can someone survive without food? Oddly enough, extra body weight can actually help here. In 1973, the University of Dundee's Medical School published a study on a Scotsman named Angus Barbieri, who weighed 207 kilograms. Under continuous medical supervision, he fasted until he reached his target weight of 82 kilograms, a process that took 382 days, more than a full year. Throughout that entire stretch, he consumed nothing but tea, coffee, calorie-free soda water, and vitamins. But excess weight only helps you survive that long if you also have enough water-soluble B vitamins on hand, since the body needs them to break down fat stores. Without them, the odds drop sharply. It's entirely possible to starve to death while still technically overweight. In other documented cases, fasting with adequate fluid intake allowed people to survive anywhere from 46 to 73 days. Back in 1997, the British Medical Journal put the practical survival limit with water available at 30 to 40 days. Severe, often irreversible damage begins around the 35 to 40 day mark, and death typically follows after about 45. The danger doesn't end when the fast does either. Returning to normal eating too quickly can trigger refeeding syndrome, a sudden spike in insulin and shift in blood electrolytes that can be fatal on its own, which is exactly why extended fasts like Barbieri's are only ever done under constant medical supervision. How many years can a human being actually live? Scientists don't agree on this one. Dutch geneticist Jan Vig analyzed an international database of long-lived people and concluded that after decades of rapid gains in life expectancy, the maximum age ceiling actually froze back in the 1980s, settling at around 115 years. By his calculations, you'd need 10,000 worlds like ours just to get decent odds of anyone reaching 125. The findings sparked a heated debate in the scientific community, and plenty of his colleagues pushed back hard against the conclusion. A later study by demographer Kenneth Wachter found that after age 105, the risk of death actually stops climbing and levels off onto a plateau. Someone who's already reached 105 has roughly the same odds of seeing their next birthday as someone who's already made it to 120. Wachter takes that as strong evidence that even if there is a hard ceiling on human lifespan, we're still nowhere close to hitting it. There's also a purely biological explanation for a possible ceiling, the so-called Hayflick limit, the idea that cells can only divide a fixed number of times before they stop renewing themselves. Some gerontologists consider that the real cap on human lifespan, rather than any specific number of years. The all-time record belongs to Frenchwoman Jeanne Calment, who died in 1997 at the age of 122. When she was born back in 1875, the telephone didn't exist yet. Neither did the light bulb, the Eiffel Tower, or cinema. The title of oldest living person on the planet keeps changing hands. According to the most recently confirmed data from Guinness World Records, it currently belongs to Britain's Ethel Caterham, who's over 116, while the record among men belongs to Brazil's João Marinho Neto, who's over 113. And how long can someone survive after they've already died? In 2008, 59-year-old American Velma Thomas suffered a heart attack. Doctors tried everything, including techniques borrowed straight from Anna Bogenholm's case, hypothermia included. But after 17 hours with no brain activity, no pulse, and no blood pressure, they made the call to take her off life support. 10 minutes into the process, as doctors were removing her breathing tubes, Velma moved her hand, coughed, and woke up. And how long can a person go without sleep? I've actually made a whole separate video on that one, but the short version, American Randy Gardner stayed awake for 264 hours straight, 11 days. According to some accounts, his mental state stayed remarkably stable, and he even beat someone at pinball on day 10. Other researchers who studied the case paint a much darker picture: delusions, memory lapses, paranoia, and fragmented thinking by the end of the experiment. That's exactly why Guinness World Records stopped recognizing voluntary sleep deprivation as an official record category, to avoid encouraging further attempts. Even so, later unofficial attempts pushed the number even higher, up to 449 hours, nearly 19 days. There's no documented case of anyone dying purely from lack of sleep, but there is a rare genetic disorder, fatal familial insomnia, that makes sleep physically impossible altogether. That, as far as anyone can tell, is the real biological limit. Patients typically die around a year and a half after the disease begins. So what about your own limits? How far have you pushed your body? Tell me in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.